Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? What's up, everybody? I'm Phil.
And I'm Cameron.
Two Navy vets, just here to talk politics.
We're here with some differing views, but we're here to have a civil and a healthy discussion.
Thanks for tuning in to Pocket Politics. What's going on, Cam?
Not much. How are you this week?
Pretty good, pretty good. Welcome back to Pocket Politics. Not the most exciting week, but this week we are going to talk about the special master.
Also, we'll have some talk about Joe Manchin's energy deal and some pushback from some progressive Democrats.
Yep, I think we're going to look at a little bit of the South Carolina Senate race, along with some House races.
And we got the Minnesota governor race tossed in there as well, along with some stuff on Georgia Senate race. And also, let's not forget, a same-sex marriage bill that is on its way to potentially falling flat on its face in the Senate.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, let's dig right in. This week, Trump gets his appeal heard to get a special master appointed. In short, this is a arbiter that is appointed to basically look over all the documents that were at Mar-a-Lago and decide if any of them are privileged by executive privilege.
It's supposed to be like a third-party neutral person, right? Is in theory what this is supposed to be.
Absolutely, and for most accounts, it's all bullshit, right? Like, this judge, a lot of people are coming out on both sides, right? I think most famously, Bill Barr, the former attorney general for President Trump himself, said this decision is not based in fact and could even put this judge's career in jeopardy. What happens now, Cam?
Who knows? I mean, really, I hate to even speculate anymore. I mean, this thing right now, I think, aren't they bogged down on who's the special master is going to be? Isn't the DOJ's got a couple names I saw this morning floating out there. The Trump side has a couple names floating out there. I mean, I guess first they've got to figure out who it's even going to be, right?
Well, yeah, because both parties have to agree to the person. Right. And then keep in mind, the person has to have the clearance level that's basically like...
that, which is very hard to find someone with that clearance level.
They may not find somebody with that clearance level. Now,
or they would have to get someone that clearance level, which you and I know that is not an overnight process. That takes a long time.
Absolutely. So this is a stall tactic. Now, the DOJ appealed it, right, yesterday. Either yesterday or Thursday they appealed it. So they met the deadline. They went ahead and appealed it. Now it goes to the 11th Court of Appeals, or the 11th Circuit of Appeals. There was some speculation. I read a New York Times article that was saying that the 11th Circuit has 6 Republican-appointed judges and 5 Democrat-appointed judges. Now, whether that holds any water... I mean, Bill Barr basically said the current president controls executive privilege, and the current president has already said that the former president doesn't have any executive privilege. So is anybody else really going to determine? I mean, I think this is largely just a stall tactic by the Trump lawyers. And
I mean, it kind of looks to be a lawyer-like move, doesn't it? I mean, I say lawyer-like move, you say stall tactic, that's what I'm saying. It kind of looks like a move some attorneys are putting in place. I mean, you talked about that judge, by the way, that granted the request for this. That is a Trump-appointed judge, from what I understand down there.
Yeah. And there's even question of her jurisdiction, right? Like, he appealed to her because she was a Trump-appointed judge, but she's in northern Florida, I think. She's nowhere near Mar-a-Lago. So it's a little bit weird. I don't know.
I didn't get what part of Florida. I just know it's somewhere in Florida. I didn't know northern Florida. That's interesting if it's not even around Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, it's a different jurisdiction, which is kind of interesting. But the other part of this too is that, of course, she's Trump appointed, but people are also saying that she's hugely unqualified to even be that judge. Right? She's 38 years old, which doesn't sound very judgely in my opinion.
It does sound young for a judge.
Don't typically judges have like a seasoned law career before they become judges. Most of them, you
I
think?
mean, you would think so.
Yeah. So I think this gets appealed. And the appeal's going to go to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and I think it's going to get shot down. I mean, 6-5, and like I said, they're Republican appointed, but not all Trump appointed, I believe. So I don't think that this is going to hold up, especially when so many prominent legal people are coming out, even prominent like Bill Barr, right, who is, basically weaponized the Justice Department for President Trump.
Yeah, but I mean, Bill Barr, to be fair, though, has, I mean, I don't know if I want to say reached his breaking point, but he has been coming out. I mean, he, at this point in time, doesn't seem to be afraid to speak out against the former president.
Well, yeah, and he's got to sell books too. So, I mean,
Don't they all?
let's be fair, right? He's got to sell his book. So,
I mean, I was just saying, though, Bill Barr does seem to be the kind of guy now who's like, well, hey, it is what it is. If the guy's crossed the line, he seems to not be afraid to say that. So
yeah. Now, I will say that 11th Circuit Court of Appeals can overturn this. It could also then just get reappealed. So there was talk also, that same New York Times article was saying that this could end up just getting caught up in time and going all the way up to the Supreme Court. Who knows what's going on with this thing? But
this could take months.
This could take years, actually.
I guess
theoretically, if they keep appealing it all the way up to the Supreme Court, we could be talking about years for this case. Now, I mean, what are your thoughts? Does it, how hard is it going to be to find somebody first to even be the special master, to get both sides to agree?
Very.
Okay.
To get the Department of Justice and the Trump camp to agree on one person, I don't even know how you would ever find that person.
And one person that has
the clearance, yeah.
The clearance and the need to know. And because all these documents, so many of them were compartmentalized, they're saying that most Trump aides, right, most of the president's aides wouldn't even be able to look at these.
I mean, you're asking me, I don't. This sounds like it's nearly impossible to find anyone that meets these criteria.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is. I don't even know where this one goes, other than nowhere. I guess. I mean, I say nowhere, meaning I think it's going to get tossed at some point. Probably a stall tactic. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to even speculate because you've got me now sitting here thinking who in the world would even meet that criteria?
Yeah, and so I don't know. Who knows? And we can spin our wheels all we want, but this is just another one of the 16 investigations that President Trump is facing right now.
I feel like if we have nothing else to talk about, we can just Google Trump and there'll be something that pops up on one of his latest investigations, and we'll have something there.
Yeah, no, I actually think there was something yesterday in one of the different a revelation in one of another one of the 16 investigations that the former president is currently under.
Every week. There's always something to talk about every week. This is the one this week, I guess, is the special master. Why don't we look at the Manchin energy deal, Phil? What do you think on that one?
So, well, first of all, we got to talk about what it is, right? And so, in order to get Manchin's support on the Inflation Reduction Act that Biden signed into law a couple weeks ago, right? Chuck Schumer basically made a deal with Senator Manchin to change some permitting guidelines, and they're going to lump it in with the continuing resolution, which affects whether or not they shut down the government or not.
Now you say change. Sorry, Phil, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was just going to say you say change of permitting. Manchin wanted to speed up the permits.
I was going to kind of get into those details.
Okay,
a little
please
bit later.
Keep going. I'm sorry, keep going.
But yeah, so they're going to lump this into the continuing resolution to keep the government funded, which again, right, it's a little crazy that we're still operating under continuing resolutions in the first place. What is going on? That's
But that seems to be the norm nowadays.
Well, really only for the last 2 years.
Right, but I say nowadays though, right?
Yeah.
It just seems to be the norm, so.
But yeah, because fundamentally the government can't agree to keep themselves operating under a budget, right? And so we have to operate under these continuing resolutions. Now, I think 70-something Democrats in the House have basically said that they're opposed to this.
from what I've read, if I may, on that one, Phil, I think it's all kind of the more progressive wing of the Democrats. The only senator I've heard that's speaking out against it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you maybe have heard others. The only senator though I've heard speaking out against it is Bernie Sanders.
Yes, that's the same kind of information that I have.
Yeah, and technically Bernie Sanders is not a member of the Democratic Party. I mean, he is an independent. So.
Yeah.
But he's the only senator I've heard. The 70 or so House members, though, again, I think more progressive wing. Manchin's big thing, and even Senator Schumer said this, look, I maybe didn't agree with everything here, but I cut a deal with this man who helped us out. And I think Schumer wants to push this on, is what I'm reading. Aren't you, Phil, as well?
Yeah, I am. And I think that even without, if the rest of the Republicans agree to just keep the government funded and not shut us down.
Which could be a tall order.
Well, but we're getting ready to go into the holidays. That would be very bad for Republicans to shut them down. I mean,
I'm just saying crazy things do sometimes happen when we start talking about funding the government. So.
I agree, but keep in mind they're funded under this continuing resolution as well. So I think that, you know, for us to go into the holidays without a operational government would be a major faux pas. And again,
what you're saying is you don't think there's any kind of GOP energy for that.
No, I don't see why they would not agree. And also, this is a GOP style, like, at least, you know, somewhat moderate GOP style legislation, right? Like, this is potentially fixes bureaucracy. And again, I'll get into the details to that in a minute, but without 70 Democrats in the House, you know, if every other Democrat says yes to this, and if every Republican says yes to this still passes easily.
I mean, let's be fair, I don't see him getting every Republican. I think if you get a large number of Democrats to vote on anything on a bill, I think you can count out a few Republican House members. You know where I'm going with this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. But I think the majority of them would probably
They're probably only going to vote against it because Joe Manchin himself has a D next to his name.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those three names I mentioned in particular... You're 100% right. If there's someone with a D next to their name that is behind a bill, they throw it out, right? I mean, it's something they're gonna vote against it. But I think there are plenty of other Republicans in the House that would go along with it. It's a number of environmental concerns, I think, or environmental concerns, I should say, is what's got some of those Democrats pushing back on this a little bit. Mountain Valley Pipeline, I know in West Virginia, is one of them that Senator Manchin from West Virginia wants to get this thing going. It's supposed to deliver natural gas into West Virginia, and Virginia is my understanding quite a lot of it. But I also read where there are some Democrats saying, hey, this may not be something that I'm all for. Like I said, Schumer had said it, but there's some other ones too who said, hey, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, some of these other things may not necessarily be what I like, but let's look big picture. Like that whole Inflation Reduction Act, Manchin helped us get there. Let's honor the deal.
Yeah. So, and again, for if I take the progressive liberal stance, I can see that there are some issues with this permitting reform. But at the end of the day, when I really dug into the nuts and bolts and read about how this thing is, I mean, so if you look at every single permit that's currently in the process of being adjudicated, right? Every single one of them, only 15% of them are related to fossil fuels, and of those 15%, almost all of them are for natural gas or other sustainable projects, right? So, and honestly, like at this rate, natural gas is cleaner and better than coal and oil, and so I'm not kind of that opposed to. I still think this is some progress in the right direction, right? I think it is. Yeah, in the short term, is it ideal? No, but guess what? We don't, in a functioning government and in a democracy, people don't always get what they want. And you have to make some concessions. And so I think this is a time where they just need to make some concessions and get this stuff done. And again, at the end of the day, it's not getting rid of permitting. It's not getting rid of this NEMA adjudication of permits for projects. It's just shortening the time, right? Because I looked it up. On average, for environmental-based projects, the permitting takes on average 4.5 years. They're going to cut that down to 2 years for large-scale projects and 1 year for smaller projects. and they said nationwide things like an interstate system or something like that, or a chunk of railroad to increase rail service, right? Like, so this project that they've been talking about in California for a high-speed rail for a long time, a project like that could take 7 years to adjudicate. So I think in some ways we're just allowing things to get done quicker, and I don't think this is all that bad.
Well, and going back to what you said earlier, talking about Republican support, I mean, some of these details sound like things that Republicans would be behind. Hey, speeding up permits for energy, pipelines, things like that. These are kind of talking points Republicans have. So I could see where this, and I say talking points, things they've championed, right? So I could see this, being something that Republicans could be in favor of. And again, I think it kind of goes back to what we said, and you and I talked about this some weeks ago when this deal happened, is honoring the deal, right? This was a thing, and I say this, being the Inflation Reduction Act, something that it sounded like, I mean, I wasn't there, you weren't there, but it sounded like Schumer and Manchin put a lot of work into this, and it sounded like there was a lot of back and forth, and they had one of those good old-fashioned handshake deals, like, look, I'm going to give some, and you're going to give some, and they both did, right? To be fair, they both gave some and all that stuff. And I think at the end of the day, I think for Democrats, right, I think it's important for them to honor their deal that they've got with Senator Manchin, right? And that, the whole deal in and of itself.
Well, keep in mind, he is a Democrat, too.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. He's a member of their own party. That's what I'm saying. I think it's important for them. I think it's important for Democrats to get behind this. Like I said, I think Manchin helped them out. The Democrats really did come together on that Inflation Reduction Act, and I think it's important they see this thing through the finish line, in my opinion. I think for the Democrats, I think they should see it through.
Well, absolutely. And I think most of them want to. I mean, there's 207 or something? Or is that, no, that's the Republican numbers. 240 something, I think. Whatever the case is.
It's a slim lead for the Democrats. But regardless, there's quite a few that want, if they can get the Republican support, I think the Senate will, well, you never know. But I mean, I think there's feelings there. I think there's energy there to get this thing done.
I will say, with the caveat, too, that I think a lot of Republicans know that if for some reason they don't fund the continuing resolution and keep the government open, and that happens before November,
well, that's it. Yeah,
that's another huge talking point going into November. It's look at all these names that are currently going to run for Congress, run for re-election, that are shutting down the national parks, and your son in the military might not be getting paid before the holidays, and all of these other things, right?
Yeah, and I think that's you. I mean, you said it a little bit ago, right? People, they've got to watch what they're doing in an election year, and this, you're right. There probably is zero appetite for that in an election year. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, Phil, is this really an issue, or does this get through?
It was kind of big in the news, but I think this gets through. Like I said, I think that most Republicans and most Democrats are going to be on board with this, and it's going to pass.
So you think just kind of hype from the news?
I mean, there was some mention there, and 70 is not a small number. Now in the House, it's relatively small because it's not even a majority of the Democrats, let alone anywhere close to a majority of the 435 seats, But so I don't want to minimize it. 70 is not a small number, but it's not big enough to really change much in the House.
Okay. Why don't we go down to the state of South Carolina?
Yeah, this is another one, right? I think is kind of non-news, but for some reason it made a lot of news.
Well, I think it makes news because of what was said here. So let's give our listeners just a little bit of background on this one. This is the South Carolina Senate race, and the Democratic candidate is a lady named Crystal Matthews. She's currently a state representative, and she is running against Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina. And she made some controversial comments. Specifically, she talked about, well, my district is, and I think she was talking about some redistricting that happened down there, and like, well, my district is mostly whites. This is what she was saying. And then she went on to say something to the effect of, I've got to keep them under my thumb to keep them where I want them and treat them like crap. There was a number of not so good things said here.
Yeah, so she made disparaging comments about her constituents, and now her party is telling her to resign, which is kind of controversial because then there will be no Democratic candidate. But let's keep in mind, the reason why I say this is not very much news, is because Tim Scott looks like he's going to win overwhelmingly. I mean, in this district or in the South Carolina Senate race, because it's a statewide race, he has got overwhelming numbers. I mean, he's got ridiculous numbers. The only poll that I was able to find for this one, she had 25 points.
Yeah,
I mean, like
it's
he
very
had
hard
almost,
to find polls.
Yeah,
like no one's even wasting their time on polls there.
Exactly, but 25 points is like
That's ridiculous.
it's stupid low. That's like Ross Perot low.
Yeah, that is ridiculous low. I mean, so essentially we're talking about Tim Scott with 70 some points. I mean, these are like FDR numbers.
Well, they're not that high because there's
there's like a third party candidate.
There's an independent candidate and then there's another fourth party candidate too.
He's still high though.
He's ridiculously high. He's almost 60.
Yeah.
See, he's almost at 60. So he's going to win overwhelmingly in the state, and there's no chance. Sure, resign or don't resign. I don't really care. She's not winning.
There was some Democrats in South Carolina that came out and said, "Hey, you cannot be saying these things." We've called out folks on the other side of the aisle when they've made some disparaging comments. You can't be saying these things either. This was a audio, if you will, and so Ms. Matthews is saying, "Oh, that's a doctored audio. I didn't really say those things," but I mean, I don't know what they're doctoring or how they.
Who cares?
Yeah,
I mean, who cares? Okay, sure.
So,
deep fakes exist, right? So you can doctor audio, and you can even doctor video, and you can do a really good job of it. It's been proven. However, she's not going to win anyway. And guess what?
Yeah, I don't think anybody would go waste the time on this race to go fix this.
Yeah,
thing.
in the primary, she barely. She didn't barely win the primary. She didn't even win the primary. They had to take it to a runoff.
Yeah.
And it was it was ridiculous.
So she's not even a candidate that really all the Democrats there overwhelmingly back.
She got to a runoff by getting 34% of the vote.
Yeah, that's not very high.
That's not very high. And her opponent got 34% of the vote, and it forced a runoff. So
Yeah, well, and so now she's refusing to drop out of the race, at least as of earlier today. I haven't checked lately, but she's refusing to drop out. And Phil, you said it a little bit ago. Her dropping out may, I think, at this point in time, now that we're in September, will mean there will be no one on the ballot. But you just said it does there even need to be? Tim Scott's going to crush this race.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like the independent candidate or that fourth party, whatever it is holding much water at all.
Not if he's polling in the 60s.
I think it's almost 60. I think it's 58 or 59, something like that. But either way, that's an overwhelming win. It's just, this is to me is kind of a who cares?
But yeah, it may be one of those things where the Democrats should just say, yeah, we'll take no one on that ticket. We'll spend the money elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think they should. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean,
I'm sure there is a House race somewhere in South Carolina that is more important.
Yeah, I mean,
especially since House races are not statewide races.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think at the end of the day, the Democrats ought to just punt this one. You've got a candidate who's saying controversial things. Get away from defending that, right? Mm-hmm. What she said is not right. Move on. Don't even worry about that race. Senator Scott's, I hate to say a lock, but he's pretty darn close to being a lock. At the end of the day, it is what it is. I think, again, the woman should not be saying these things. I'm glad folks from both sides of the aisle are calling her out on it. And then from here on out, whether she said them or not, Tim Scott's got this race.
Well, from here on out, if you're a Democrat in South Carolina, put up somebody that could win. I mean,
well, we spent a lot of time talking about the candidates who people are putting up that are not gonna win, right? And
we're going to talk about some this week,
and we've talked about some the last several weeks.
Yeah, so
that's what I'm saying. But that goes for both parties, right? Vet your darn candidates, right? Put the people out there that have a chance.
Yeah,
that goes for both parties.
I agree. So, who has a chance? Tim Scott has a chance. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. It sounds like he's going to crush it.
Yeah.
It's interesting with South Carolina Senate races, too. I remember a couple of years ago, I believe it was 2020, when Lindsey Graham was last up for re-election. And I remember, I don't remember who was running against Senator Graham, but there was somebody who, for weeks and weeks and weeks, I was watching the news. And they're like, oh, watch the South Carolina Senate race. Graham may very well go down. This person is, really pulling close to him in the polls. And then when Election Day came around, Graham crushed whoever that opponent was. I don't even remember who the opponent was. I just remember there was a big deal made out of Senator Lindsey Graham maybe going down. And he crushed him.
Yeah, and let's not be real, right? Like South Carolina is like not the bastion of good politics, right? I mean,
well, I mean, it's a very red state. I mean,
no, but I'm just saying in general, they've had a lot of political like issues in the state, right? Like, didn't they had a governor or a senator a while back that kind of resigned in scandal, and it was cheating on his wife, and there was all kinds of other stuff. I can't remember. I think it might have been the governor, but I can't remember.
It could be. I mean, I'd have to look back on that one. I mean, it's a state though that's brought us people like Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. I mean, I think Tim Scott nationwide, I think, has quite a bit of popularity. But yeah, there's, at the end of the day, you just said it. Tim Scott's going to win this thing, Phil, and I think we'll move on from here to a bit of sad news. I was just going to bring up, as we all know, the Queen passing away.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean,
Well, Gee, okay.
Well, I mean, isn't their country governed by a parliament anyway? And the Queen really doesn't do anything but colonialize India, and
it is kind of symbolic at this point. 96 years old, though. She was a key friend of many politicians around the world, including, certainly U.S. presidents through the years. Many have gotten to know her.
My favorite is the spectrum of how people feel on this, right? Like, some people feel very emotional and like this is a huge deal. And some people are like, nah, fuck it. Like, I don't care about this. And then some people are even mad that we're talking about the royal family. I mean, this is like got the widest spectrum of feelings of anything I've ever seen. I mean, and I think there's some funny things out there about this too. Like, did you know that they have to change all their currency now because the Queen is on the currency?
I mean, I didn't know until you just mentioned it, but I mean...
so they have to change the coin now to have King Charles III, King Charles III on the pound.
That's interesting.
And then, and there's something about, I think, because it was always the Queen's right side, but for some reason, you always see the King's left side. So there's like some weird things about that. The national anthem for the country changed.
God Save the Queen.
Yeah, it was God Save the Queen, and now it's God Save the King, and they sang it like yesterday on the,
it's those little things that you just don't think of.
Yeah. They canceled all of Premier League soccer, which ruins my weekend mornings, because that's, something I do on the weekends is wake up early and watch soccer games. But I heard a comparison to like, somebody was saying she'd been the Queen so long, she'd seen however many iterations of Batman, right? All the way back to Adam West. She was the Queen when Adam West was like the original Batman. So.
70 years, right? Wasn't she the Queen 70 years?
Yeah, that's a pretty long time. So
that's huge. I mean, think back. I mean, think of all the presidents that she would have lived through or been the Queen through. U.S. presidents.
I actually saw a thing. I think something I follow on Instagram actually did that. It showed her meeting all these different U.S. presidents, as the Queen.
Yeah, I mean, going back 70 years, gosh, I mean, who would have been president at the time when now I'm trying to think. Are we talking Truman or...
I think Truman, yeah Truman was the first one.
Truman was probably the first one. If we go back 70 years, either Truman or Ike, one of those two.
Well, 1952, so...
was it 52? Yeah, that would have been Truman then, I guess.
Yeah, so I think Truman was the first one. So it is pretty crazy. Like I said, I think the stuff that is most interesting is like changing the currency and changing the national anthem and things like that.
I did see some clips, on the news talking about, or showing clips rather, of her interacting with U.S. presidents, showing her horseback riding with Ronald Reagan. There was clips in there, of her interacting with George W. Bush, and he had said something about living through 1776 when we split, and somehow he had screwed up and made a reference as if she was still alive, or as if she was alive in 1776 or something. And I forget exactly how it went, but somehow it came out Bush said something that didn't come out the way he wanted it to come out, but it all sounded like he was referencing that. And then
Was this George W?
yeah, W. It was
Of
W.
course, he had a blunder, right? Like
he did, but in true spirit, right? Bush laughs at his own blunders, right? W does, and so like a year later or something, the Queen's talking about it, and she poked back at Bush about not, well, I was alive apparently in 1776 according to your president, or something to that effect, and Bush got laughed, out of the deal. So it is so interesting when you think back on it. The woman was 96 years old, and we just said it. 70 years that you were the queen. Think of all the things that have happened in the last 70 years, or even in 96 years in her lifetime, right? Think of that. All the crazy things that have happened for someone who has lived almost 100 years. It really is something. It's certainly making the news around the world. It is sad to hear of her passing, although I think she had been kind of sick and not in the best of health, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, because I read an article that said the Queen's health is declining. I actually didn't even read the article because I don't care, but I just saw the headline, and it said the Queen's health is declining, and then like a half an hour later, it was announced that she was dead, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, but I think she had been in failing health the last few years. I don't think she'd even been traveling as of the last few years. I think she just, given her advanced age and everything else, I think her health was declining. So
absolutely.
Nevertheless, she did pass away, but and again, sad news. So rest in peace to the Queen.
But more importantly, we've got primaries this week.
Yeah. So this week we do. So on Tuesday, we've got the last of the primaries here, and that is 3 states coming up: Delaware, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire brings us some interesting things, does it not, Phil?
Yeah, so first I want to say I think Delaware and Rhode Island are kind of, for the most part, a wash, right? Like, I don't think we're going to see much out of that. However, New Hampshire, you've got this, candidate that's running, retired brigadier general in the Army, Don Bolduc. What do you know about him?
So here's what I know. And again, this is the GOP primary for the Senate candidate, right? Don Bolduc, retired brigadier general, as you just said. I don't know. He's danced around a little bit in politician. I think he ran for something in 2020, wasn't it?
He ran for Senate, yeah, and got beat.
Okay, so he all right. So he's been around a little bit. My understanding, though, is that he's known to be an off-the-cuff guy. Some Republicans have spoken out against him. I think the New Hampshire governors himself, Republicans, said like this guy is not fit to run.
The governor is getting involved in this race, which is hilarious, and so.
But isn't that correct, though, Phil? He's known to say some off-the-cuff things, from what I understand. And
I think you said full MAGA, right? Earlier when we talked.
That's kind of what he's known.
He's pretty radical. So he's going up against Chuck Morse. Is Chuck Morse the incumbent? No. Yeah, because they're going to race a Democratic senator.
Yeah, which is to be okay. Yeah, so you mentioned Chuck Morse. So this is a seat Republicans think they can flip up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But
not with Don Bolduc.
So that's what I was going to say. So there's a bunch of Republicans who are kind of excited, like, this is a seat we think we can take. And Chuck Morse, and then it's like all of a sudden, and here comes Don Bolduc, and I saw a poll, Phil. I think you said you didn't really see any polls on where they're heading. I thought I saw some polling that suggested Bolduc may actually win this primary.
Yeah, and the problem with that is if Republicans want to win this seat, the major issue with that is that he doesn't raise money well. They said he's raised like $600,000, which in today's political world is nothing. The governor is opposed to him, so obviously the governor would probably have to change that idea if he makes it through to the general election. This could be, this could be some bad news if this guy wins on the Republican ticket.
Yeah, it sounds like the Republicans are trying to push up, definitely push up Morse in this one, or some Republicans around the state. I think I've seen some, or I read something though, where the Democrats up in New Hampshire are spending millions on candidates for GOP. And when I say they're doing that, we've seen them do this in some other states where they're spending money on the ultra far right candidate, hoping to get him or her to win, thinking they can more easily beat them in the race. When they go head to head, thinking their Democrat candidates have a better shot. That's a risky That's a risky thing for Democrats to be doing, though.
Well, we don't know. We don't know if it's risky or not. I mean, we haven't.
Well, I think it can be. I say that. I mean, well, I'll let you finish. I've got a couple things.
No,
on
I
that.
agree. I think it is potentially risky. I just don't think we know because we haven't seen how this strategy is going to work out in the long term. Right now, they've done this all over the country. They've propped up some of these. They've propped up QAnoners. They've propped up January 6th rioters. Yeah, they've done this all over the country. But we don't know how this is going to turn out yet. So yes, do I think it is very much potential risk.
Going back, so I say risky, right? I think it is risky for Democrats because, and to be fair, many Democrats have said this too because they've said, hey, we may end up putting some of these ultra-right folks in, or they may end up winning the election. Here's one, though, that I think is interesting. Adam Kinzinger, himself a Republican out of Illinois, he's been pretty upset that Democrats have been doing this. And he said something recently that I thought was, definitely a strong statement. And he said this. He said, the Democrats keep saying that where are the good Republicans? And he's like, my answer to them is you keep spending money to get them primaried out. Mm-hmm. And so, basically what Kinzinger is saying is, hey, we've had a lot of moderate candidates who've now been pushed out of the way because Democrats are spending money on trying to prop up the ultra MAGA candidate or whatever. Now, to be fair, I mean, I don't think that's the sole reason, right? I mean, obviously people are coming out to vote for these candidates, these far-right candidates. But nevertheless, it is a controversial move by the Democrats. Some in the Democratic Party are against it, some for it, etc. Some moderate Republicans are pretty upset about it. Up in New Hampshire, they are doing it again, though. Phil, you bring up a point, though. We'll see how it turns out come November, whether the Democrats were successful with that strategy or not.
Yeah, now, I will say, to add to that, if it is successful, this should be a one-off strategy, right? Even if it is successful, this should not be the way of doing business going forward.
Yeah, I just don't think it is. I mean, at the end of the day, I know politics can get dirty and nasty, but I mean, this one sounds pretty dirty and nasty. I mean, they're out there spending money for folks that are, you said it earlier, like QAnon conspiracy people, rioters, you name it, right? They've spent some money on some, dare we say, not quality candidates, I guess, to use some of, I guess I semi-quoted Mitch McConnell there, didn't I? He's talked about some not quality candidates, but yeah, they've been putting out, they're spending some money on some characters, I'll say that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a fan of doing it anyway. I agree with Representative Kinzinger on this one. But yeah, I think we'll see how it plays out though this fall. There are, though, speaking of fall, there are some interesting House races though that are getting tight. Up in the Pennsylvania 8th, up there's a gentleman named Matt Cartwright, who is the Democrat incumbent, going against Jim Bognet. Now, this district in Pennsylvania covers the Scranton and Wilkes-Barre area of Pennsylvania. Why do I say Scranton? Because that's where President Biden's actually from. It is a district that leans red, and so we've seen more and more in the last few election cycles where this area seems to be getting, I say leaning red, seems to get more red every election, right? And that being said, Cartwright is actually the incumbent up there. They think Cartwright could win this one, and the reason some people are watching it is they say if Cartwright overperforms and wins and keeps his seat up there, that this could potentially signal Democrats doing better than expected. We've kind of already seen that in a couple things. I mean, we've talked about that recently in some of these special elections where the Democrats have won, but this particular race in Pennsylvania has some people keeping an eye on it, but because of, hey, they want to see how the Democrats perform. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I think he stands a chance. We talked about it a little bit. It is kind of too close to call.
Yeah.
At this point, so that's certainly one to watch for. What else do we have?
Well, down in Virginia, right, the 2nd District in Virginia, the incumbent is Elaine Luria, and we know her from the January 6th committee, but also she's a 20-year Navy veteran, retired Navy commander, and the incumbent down there, right? And she's running against a woman named Jen Kiggins. Phil, what do you think on this one?
Well, I think so. I think she stands a decent chance of still winning. Now she has.
You say she, you mean Luria?
Oh yeah,
Luria.
Elaine Luria. So she has fought either. I think we kind of touched on this before the pod, but either some redistricting or some map changes.
Yeah,
has affected
some
her
new
district.
congressional lines. Yeah, so her district is now a little redder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a little redder, which is making this tough for her, or a tougher race for her.
Now, with that being said, there, the Politico dashboard kind of said it's still a toss-up, but it is a toss-up in Luria's favor.
Yeah, and I think, and you and I have said this before, right? This, if in these toss-up races, you kind of have to go with the incumbent, if for no other reason they've won down there before. Representative Luria, she came to light in 2018 when she first got elected as part of the Democrats' blue wave, if you will, that year, right? The Democrats did pretty darn well in that election, and so that's what brought us Miss Luria, and so we'll see if she can continue down there, or if the new congressional lines down there maybe work against her,
or be it participating in the January 6th committee could work against her too.
It could. So it could, but like I said, she is the incumbent down there. She has name recognition. I think that's one to watch, though, definitely going forward. Don't you, Phil?
Absolutely. And then I also think that, so I do think that if she wins again, this could be another sign that, the Democrats are holding, right? So we're probably not going to know. This has the potential to be like a 3 or 4 day after the race, because it could be very, very close before we actually find out who wins.
Yeah, that one could be a few days, I guess. And some of those other House races could be as well, the close ones. And it's interesting, too, and you and I have talked about this, some of those House races kind of fall under the radar, if you will. I have a feeling, though, this one down in Virginia is going to be getting quite a bit of attention in the coming weeks. Don't you, Phil?
I do. Now, speaking of House races that need attention, we've got, so it should be noted there's like 3 candidates running for the House that, again, participated to some level in the January 6th riots. So there's the lady running for North Carolina's 1st congressional district, Sandy Smith. She's pretty crazy, very outspoken. Was at January 6th. Again, I'm not 100% sure on the level of participation, but
yeah, let's be fair, right? I mean, there are some of these people were at the protests, not necessarily rioting and busting into the Capitol.
Yeah, and entering the Capitol. I will say that it doesn't look like she is going to run, which is probably a good thing to keep potential insurrectionists out of the government.
You mean win?
Oh, sorry, win. Yes.
Yeah, you said run.
Sorry.
She's already running.
Yeah,
so.
she is already running. So it doesn't look like she's going to win. But there are 2 candidates that, had some level of participation as well that might. So in Ohio's 9th district, this guy, J.R. Majewski, now he's come out and said the FBI, dropped charges against him. So he's not guilty of anything, which is kind of ironic because just because the FBI dropped the charges means that there were charges at some point. So maybe the FBI just didn't think it was worth pursuing this particular case.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of reasons that law enforcement dropped charges, and then Derek Van Orden, a former Navy SEAL, in Wisconsin's 3rd. So he stands a chance too. I think they're still saying both these races are toss-ups, but toss-up means there's a chance.
Yeah, I think that Wisconsin 3rd is a kind of a conservative district. You and I were talking about that earlier before we started recording. I think that's Ron Kind's district up there in Wisconsin. He's more of a kind of a conservative Democrat, if you will. Mm-hmm. Kind is retiring now. Republicans think they've got a shot at it. They've got this retired Navy SEAL going out there. The last 2 candidates you mentioned, well, and I think Smith is in there too. They haven't been able to prove they broke in and busted down windows, etc., and rioted at the Capitol. We only know for certain that they were there protesting. Is that correct?
Well, not quite. I mean, J.R. Majewski, I think it was proven that he helped break the barriers, break
Okay.
through barriers, and I think that's probably related to the charges that were dropped. But he's saying he's saying he didn't, and who really knows? I mean,
I guess the only thing there is why did the FBI drop, or why did the charges get dropped?
well, because potentially just breaking the barriers. I don't even think it's worth asking why. I think it's like maybe they just thought this particular case wasn't worth the legal battle. Because that's a lot of the times why cases are dropped anyway, is because they're like, hey, we're not 100% sure if we would win this in a court of law, and even if we did win it, it would be more effort than needs to be put forth. So they drop cases like this all the time.
Yeah,
where,
well, and sometimes it's legal technicalities. Who knows? I don't know. I was shaking my head when you first brought this up, and you may have heard me chuckling here a little bit, or I say chuckling, more like sighing, because again, we talk about quality candidates. It's like, oh brother, here we go again. Like that district in Wisconsin, again, that's a district Republicans should probably win, and I'm just sitting here like, oh no, here we go again.
Yeah,
right?
then...
So I mean, seriously, I'm like, give me some quality candidates. I feel like the governor up there in New Hampshire now, like, please, like, get some of these people out of the way so we can get some quality candidates in there. Look, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the last couple races you mentioned, in Wisconsin, Ohio, those are close races. We'll keep an eye on them to see where they go. Phil, what are your thoughts? You think you already said you don't think Sandy Smith's got a shot. What do you think of the last two races?
I think it's a toss-up. I don't know. I think it's too close to call. Again, these aren't like widely reported and widely covered. House races are kind of obscure, and unless it's like just on the micro scale, they don't get a lot of attention. It's more
yep.
The House is looked at very much in a macro sense as the whole, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's something like the January 6th committee, where we know all 6 of these people's names and are, intimately familiar with now what they are doing.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, we were talking about Luria a minute ago, right?
Absolutely.
People know
right?
who she is. Now, some of these other ones, people, like you said, they don't know them as well.
Until I was doing research for House races, I had never heard of any of them.
Yeah.
So that should be said. And honestly, until we decided to talk about the New Hampshire, this New Hampshire primary, I'd not really heard of either of these guys either on the Republican, for the Republican primary. So,
but that was a Senate. Those
and that's even a Senate race,
Yeah,
Now, I would say a fairly obscure Senate race because it is a small state, and I while they do get, 2 senators from every single state, so it's equal representation. It's like New Hampshire,
Yeah, but a lot of eyes are going to be on New Hampshire, though, because that is going to be a close race. Well,
it could be a close race.
Let me rephrase that. That is potentially going to be a close race. Republicans think they've got a shot at it, depending on who wins this nod, I guess. But I think there will be some eyes on that, especially if Morse ends up winning that one. But
absolutely.
But why don't we take a look at another Senate race here quickly? We've already talked a lot about this Senate race down in Georgia on some other podcasts. Raphael Warnock going against Herschel Walker. Reason it's breaking news this week. It looks like Herschel Walker's pulling ahead in polls down there. Phil, did you see that?
He's pulling ahead in a poll. So, I mean, there was a Trafalgar poll, which is a very right-leaning polling company that had him at 1 point ahead, I think. And then there was another poll that had him at 2. And then now there's this Atlanta Fox 5 poll that has him at a +3. With that being said, do you know much about that poll?
As far as those polls, specific poll, I mean, I know Trafalgar's more right-leaning, but the last one you mentioned...
Yeah, that Atlanta Fox 5 poll. So that was only 550 people, and it was 550 likely voters. So I will say that when we give some of these... This goes back to the whole thing. This is why, granted, we talk about them every single episode, but you can't necessarily put too much faith in what polls have to say.
Oh, you heard me give the example of Lindsey Graham a few years ago,
yeah.
right? And the polls were, Graham's vulnerable, look out. And he turned around and crushed his opponent. Phil, that's also, right, not to like go down a rabbit hole here, but that is also the same race. I do believe that Mitch McConnell was running as well, and same thing. The news media is, he's vulnerable. Look at the polls. Amy McGrath is going to beat him, right? Mitch McConnell crushed her.
Yeah, and like I said, it was 550 likely voters. So that's a very small poll. It's also a poll of, when they poll registered voters, or sometimes they poll people that absolutely say they are going to vote in the midterms. This is just likely voters. So this poll, in my opinion, doesn't have all that much weight anyway.
So a poll from this past week, an Insider Advantage poll, has Walker up 47 to Warnock's 44. One at the very end of August.
Wait, what day did you say that was?
September 6th through 7th.
So that was
550 likely voters. That's the Insider Advantage one. Is that the same one you're talking about?
Yes, the
Okay.
550. Yep.
Well, and the reason I figured was it says 550 likely voters. I'm looking on 538 right now. August 28 to 29, Emerson College has a poll out with this one where Walker's at 46, Warnock's at 44. The Trafalgar poll from late August has Walker up by a +1. So it's tight. There does look like there is some gaining momentum though for Walker.
Well, and you know why though, right? Is because he's kept his mouth shut.
Well, I think there's been a number of Republicans that have gone down there and worked with the guy, right? I mean, are trying to coach him.
But keep in mind, he's still got to go to a debate. I mean,
he agreed to him, right?
Yeah, and so that debate could crush him. I mean, like I said, the best thing that he has done to improve his status in this race is just not saying or doing anything.
So it does. So, and whether that's the case, something else. So it does look like some momentum is shifting here. To be fair, it is a red state. Warnock is an incumbent, but
he's an incumbent-ish. I mean,
he is an incumbent. He won the last special election.
But it was a special election for a 2-year seat, right? But
he's technically an incumbent.
I agree, but I will say that his partner in crime, right, gets all 6 years, right?
Right.
Warnock doesn't. So
yeah, no, it is, and that's why I say it's a tough state. I think for Warnock in the sense it is a red state, right? Mm-hmm. Herschel Walker's got a lot of name recognition down there from his football playing days. So, look, let me ask you this: are Republicans?
He's got a lot of illegitimate kids down there from his.
Apparently, 3 of them. But let me ask you this: are Republicans? Are they able to coach a guy like this? I mean, do you think they can help mold him into more of a candidate before this? I think it's an October 14th debate or something that he's got coming up with Warnock. I mean, are they going to be able to help him, Phil?
No.
You don't think so?
No, the guy's like off the tracks. I mean, every time he's in front of a microphone or a TV camera, he says something that just like makes him look so bad. I mean, we were actually, I know we're technically not supposed to be talking politics at work, but we were talking about this guy at work and just about how crazy some of the things he said and does is.
Well, we'll see how this shapes up. I mean, that debate he's supposed to be having here come October with Warnock, that is probably going to be one that's going to get some attention.
Yeah, I would love for this thing to be televised. I think I've said it again, but lest we... keep talking about this Georgia race that we've already spent so much time on. What do we got next?
Yeah, so I want to look at the Minnesota governor race, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Tim Walz versus Scott Jensen up there.
And this is one where the momentum has kind of shifted back, right?
It looks like it. I mean, as I've said before, Minnesota's a pretty blue state. Walz is the incumbent, right? So, but I want to look at something specifically here with Jensen, which probably is shifting the momentum here a little bit. Back in March, he said he was going to push for a total abortion ban in the state of Minnesota. And now he's got a new ad out saying, well, actually, abortion's a state right and, constitutional state right in Minnesota or something to that effect. And there's no sense in messing with that.
Of course he is.
Well, and so, we've kind of talked about this here recently about the abortion issue. A number of Republicans kind of backpedaling on it. It looks like Jensen's doing the same thing up there. He's trying to run from the issue.
Yeah, I mean, because it's hurting him.
Well, he's falling in the polls. So I was looking at it. There's a poll out there that's got him down 10, and a Survey USA poll now has him down 18.
Yeah,
to Walz.
That's pretty bad. So.
Well, and Phil, it wasn't but a few weeks ago we were talking about this one, and I said on there that I thought Jensen looked like he was going to give Walz a run for his money. I mean, Walz is not the most popular guy up there with voters right now. I mean, there's been a number of people that are upset about, how he's handled crime and some different things around the state. But yet it looks like he's got a pretty comfortable lead over this Jensen. So I mean, quite honestly, I don't even think this one looks like it's going to be much of a race if the polls are correct.
Yeah. Now, what is this? I mean, so this backtracking that's happening, and this is happening all over the country with Republican candidates. Does this work for them? Is this a signal that this is not going to work?
Well, it's interesting. You say, does this work? It doesn't look like it's working in Minnesota, although Jensen just came out with this ad here recently. So I guess to be fair, we'll maybe see in a couple of weeks if he gets a little bit of a bump up. Where it is interesting, though, is in Arizona, it looks like Blake Masters, that race out there against him and Kelly, is tightening up. And Blake Masters here, 2 or 3 weeks ago, came out, took all the pro-life stuff off his website, said he's now, supports abortion with some bans or whatever. He basically softened his stance on abortion, and it looks like he's rising in the polls. So
yeah, now, and then do Democrats need to keep focusing on this issue, right? Like, because here's the thing. I mean, if Masters gets elected or this guy in Virginia gets elected, do they keep to that or do they flip-flop right back just because that's the way they...
Yeah, that's an interesting question too, right?
So I think it is valuable for Democrats to keep pushing this issue. Like, just make it known to the voters that, hey, it may not be on his website now, but guess what? We know how websites work, and we can go back and show you when it was on his website.
Well, and I think the Republicans, the Democrats in Arizona are trying to do that very thing, right? Are coming out saying, look, he can say what he wants now, but here is what he was saying a few months ago in the case of Blake Masters. I'm sure there'll be something similar in the state of Minnesota with this governor race. And there's been some others, Republicans, as you mentioned, are trying to run from this issue. To go to what you said about Democrats, I said this multiple podcasts.
We have said this multiple times.
No, this needs to be their issue, right? Kansas showed us that, did it not, Phil?
It did, and I think we saw it in polls. We saw it in people in the streets marching. So I think they need to just keep pushing it, and I'm sure they will, right? They know where their bread and butter is.
I saw a thing talking about the abortion thing. I saw a thing where they looked at states and they said in 43 of 50 states they feel that that there would be a similar vote, or if a similar vote as the Kansas one was out there to protect abortion or not protect it in the state, 43 out of 50 would pass it. And and that same article I read said those other 7 states, they thought it'd be really darn competitive. So yeah, this is an issue that has blown up in the Republicans' face. A number of them are running for it. And Phil, I'll say this. I'm starting to think in 2024, right? Next election cycle, give it a couple of years and we start moving forward. I think you're going to see more Republicans come out as pro-choice, especially in maybe some of the blue and purple type states. I think you start to see some more Republicans start to soften their stance here. What do you think?
I haven't thought too much about that, but it wouldn't surprise me because they know that this is an issue that overwhelmingly Americans do not want to, they want the right to do this. And so,
I think, and here's my thing there is politicians at the end of the day, they want to win their elections, right? And so I think this is an issue that we see maybe the Republicans start to soften up a bit on. Now, in a really red state, maybe not, but yeah, I do. I think we're going to see more pro-choice Republicans come out, more of them. Especially, let's see, saw a guy like Joe O'Dea, who in Colorado running for Senate, who is a pro-choice Republican. See how he does this year. So yeah, I think it's an issue that they soften up a bit on. Speaking of social issues, though, Phil, have you heard about this same-sex marriage bill that may be now in danger in the Senate? Have you heard about that at all?
No, I haven't. Are they going to actually put this to a vote?
Sounds like, so it is a bipartisan bill, I guess, that they're trying. I say there's some senators trying to push through that is going to protect the right to same-sex marriage. Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin and Susan Collins, Baldwin being a Democrat, Collins being a Republican, they're the co-sponsors on this, if you will. Republicans, though, a number of them in the Senate are pushing back on this. They say they want religious liberty exemptions put in there. And as of right now, there are only 3 Republican senators who say they are on board. And that is Collins, who I mentioned a bit ago. She's sponsoring it. And then Senator Rob Portman of Ohio and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. Lisa Murkowski has said that she hasn't come out and said one way or the other, but she said there's a lot of things in the bill she likes. So she could very well be a supporter. But without more Republicans, this thing dies.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't think Republicans should be taking this to a vote. Like, I don't think they should be allowing this to go to a vote, because I think if this goes to a vote and it dies because of lack of Republican support, again, this is just an issue that we've seen, right? Like, the ability for people to marry who they want to marry has overwhelming support, like ridiculous support. Like, they poll this issue, it polls in like the 80s.
Yeah, no, I think this is an issue where, yet again, here's a social issue.
Yep.
Election year might be blowing up in their face again, like the abortion thing. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Democrats are like, yeah, let's try and push this thing before the midterms, right? And if so, yeah, look out. You know, it's interesting, when this thing was going through the House, though, back in July, there was 47 House Republicans that were in favor of it. You know,
which is not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's some.
It's less than 70.
Okay, going back to that, but still, there was some support in the House amongst Republicans. There's very little of it in the Senate right now. Now, again, to be fair, Mitt Romney is another one who said, "Hey, I want to look at some of these religious exemptions, possibly." But again, I've mentioned 2 others, right? Murkowski and Romney. That still doesn't get them. That still doesn't get them where they need to be to pass this thing.
I agree, but keep in mind too, with the House, the difference between the House and the Senate is the members of the House are much more vulnerable.
Well, yeah, they're running every 2 years.
I mean, they run every 2 years. It's not a statewide race, whereas the Senate is a statewide race. So, you know, the House members are probably more likely to support something that they know is overwhelmingly popular in America. Whereas the Senate can be like, you know, Mitch McConnell can basically be like, no, fuck your hopes and dreams. He doesn't, you know what I mean? He can do that because he's in the Senate, and
or any senator can, because I mean, it's only every 6 years they've got to worry about a re-election, right? And so, but again, though, going back to the social issue part of this for Republicans, man, look out on this one, right? I mean, especially if this thing comes to light before the midterms. Look out. I mean, Phil, can they afford to have another big social issue blow up in their face?
No, they can't. They can't. I mean, they can barely afford to have, like, anything go anyway right now. I mean, the Republicans are seriously in danger, especially because we have the abortion issue on the ballot, you know.
Well, I think 2 things: abortion issue and quality of candidates in the Senate races, right?
Yeah, so I just don't... I think that if the Democrats get this to a vote in the Senate, that is a huge win for the Democrats.
Is there a chance some Republicans come around at the end and support it, thinking about the political fallout? Do you see a scenario where that happens?
I do.
Okay.
And only because I think that, you know, the ones that are going to be up in 2024 are going to feel like this is an issue that they may make them particularly vulnerable, right? So especially, you know, Republicans in states that are not overwhelmingly red,
like a purple type state.
Yeah. So you may see some things. Now, do I think they get Ted Cruz? No. Do I think they get who else? I mean, you know, there's plenty of,
like a Josh Hawley. They're probably not going to get.
They're not getting Josh Hawley.
But could they get? But Elisa Murkowski, someone like that, can they get her?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and they could also probably get a couple other Republicans that we're not thinking or talking about right now.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Rob Portman's behind it, right? Tom Tillis down in North Carolina is behind. Now, granted, he's retiring, but you know, maybe there's some others. I'm trying to think now. Maybe like a Cassidy down in Louisiana, who once in a while, you know, kind of bucks the traditional party lines and votes his own, you know, or votes a different way. That there could be some other ones, especially in some of the more purplish states, potentially.
Yeah, I just think if again, like I already said it, if Democrats get a vote on this, it's gonna signal trouble.
Well,
it just is gonna signal trouble.
I will say this: as I've said with the Republicans and the abortion thing, I'm going to say this with this marriage thing. Like, Republicans, get away from this issue.
Well, but here's the crazy thing is we didn't know how popular the abortion thing was,
We do now.
and we do now.
Yeah.
But we already know how popular same-sex marriage is.
Yeah.
We already know how popular it is. So, and it's not, and it's, since it was enacted under the Obama administration, it has gotten more popular, which is crazy, right? Because it was very controversial at the time, and
Yeah, it
has
was.
and it has gotten to the point where it is so accepted and so popular that, like I said, when they poll on this nationwide, the numbers are in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I think, if Democrats get this to a vote, it'll be a huge win.
Well, I'm just saying, Republicans, get away. Get away from these social issues. Go back to what the Republican Party is known for, right?
Yeah,
the limited
right.
government.
Go
and,
give rich people tax
No,
cuts.
no.
Go get, go.
Limited government. Hang on, let me finish. The limited government, the strong national defense, right? The deregulation, the things Republicans are known for, small business friendly. Run on that. Get away from the social issues, please.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? We started off this show, Phil, saying it was kind of slow in the news week, and quite honestly, we had quite a bit to talk about. And I think it's been fun talking about it the last hour.
Absolutely. So, quick plug. Thank you for coming out, listening to us. Thanks for the engagement. Keep it up. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are available to be heard on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get podcasts. And
View our website.
you can go to our website, and there's links to all of those. So if you want to engage with us further on social media,
And don't forget to send us an email, CameronandPhil@gmail.com.
absolutely, and the website pocketpolitics.co. And with that being said, is it time for parting shots?
I think it is, Phil.
What do you got this week?
Yeah, so I'll make my parting shot this week about Brett Baer at Fox News. I'm a big fan of him, and I know there are some people that want to say bash Fox News. Oh, they're this way, they're this way. I know you do, right? And some others, right? But you know what? I watch Fox News. I watch multiple networks, right? I want to say this: Brett Baer is a journalist, and he's a darn good one. And for our listeners out there, if you haven't checked him out, I think check him out. He does a nice job trying to balance the news. He is yeah, he's someone worth watching. I enjoy him. I don't always get a chance to see him, but he's on 6 p.m. Eastern time on Fox with his show. And like I said, it's a good one, Phil. I'll even say this, Phil. I think you ought to check him out, and I think you would appreciate what Mr. Baer is doing.
Fair enough. And I will say for our listeners out there that Cameron is very much a both sides of the news, getter, right? He watches Fox. He watches MSNBC too. He goes,
I watched some CNN.
Yeah, he talks to me about reading fairly left-leaning, news sources. So I'll give Cameron a lot of credit for that. Whereas me, I don't do any of that shit. I'm get my news from one side of the aisle completely.
Here's
and listen and watch a lot of progressive, fairly progressive stuff.
Yeah,
So.
here's my thoughts there, right? I mean, I definitely lean to the right on, things. But to be fair, I like to look at things from, both sides and such. And that's why I do end up trying to watch these different news sources and read different articles and such.
Yeah,
so,
and just in the good spirit, I will go see what Brett Baer had to say about my parting shot, which is the Steve Bannon perp walk this week.
Oh, boy.
So Bannon indicted again this week, right? And there was a bunch of stuff out there. So he is being indicted.
By the way, Phil, I'm sorry. This is another guy that's just not going away.
Yeah. So indicted, I believe he was wearing the same clothes that he was wearing a couple of weeks ago.
When does he ever change clothes?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or shave.
Still hasn't had a haircut or,
Well, I should say he shaves about every 4 days because
Yeah.
he doesn't grow the full beard. He runs around with the whiskers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went off on that on a different
So
podcast.
yeah, now he's indicted in the We Build the Wall scandal. So he raised a whole bunch of money from independent donors to build the border wall, and then subsequently stole the money and laundered it. So he is indicted in the state of New York, and it will probably yet again get in trouble and have to go spend jail time. So.
if he goes to jail, who knows with this guy? Nothing seems to stick with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably going to be a convict before too long. I mean, regardless of whether he goes to jail or not, he's going to be a convicted felon. You know.
Well, if he does go to jail, he'll get a new set of clothes.
Yeah, true. That might actually be a good. Maybe he's looking forward to that. Who knows?
Yeah, well,
But-
he may even have to cut his hair. Maybe if he goes to jail. I don't know. I don't think they make him cut their hair.
I'm not sure. But either way, with that being said, I think it's time to wrap it up for this week. Thanks again to all our listeners out there. Cameron, have a great week.
Yeah, you too as well. Until